Hey guys, just wanted to make a video, an update on the Land Hero 23 horsepower mini skid steer. It's been a little over a year now since I've got it, and since I've made that last video. I've been meaning to do a update sooner than that, but it just hasn't happened. I haven't had time. Just wanted to update some things that I've done, some problems I've had, some things that have worked really good, and everything like that. So I'll start with the counterweights in the rear. I took those longer supports, that the folding supports it had off in the rear, and added these counterweights. These are about 1.25 inches thick each. I welded 3 of them together and just ran them down so they're pretty low on the machine and keep the weight pretty far rear. They're about 150, 160 pounds a piece. Doesn't really affect the machine a whole lot on handling, but it significantly helps with the pickup load, and just even having something like pallet forks on there. Those pallet forks alone weigh about 300 pounds. So it offsets that, keeps it back to its true lifting rating. I've personally picked up anywhere between 800 and 1100 pounds with this machine. It depends where you place the load on the forks, or if you have a bucket or a boom or anything like that on there. So it really depends on what attachment you're running. But significantly helps with that. It makes the machine a lot more sturdy and a lot less, I wouldn't say it was tippy before, but just makes it feel a lot more planted. Haven't had any problems with the idler wheels. These are a sealed ball bearing. They are not the angled trailer bearing style ones. And I have vigorously checked them about every couple months. Pulled the tracks off, pulled the wheels off, checked them. It's really not hard. I find it easier if you pull the cotter pin and the nut and slide that cog drive off of there. The tracks come off super easy once you loosen the nut on there. So haven't had any problems with them. And when I had them off a while back, I also repainted the front one, and those, they didn't really have paint chipping, but I just wanted them to stay nice and make sure they have good coating on them. I did go in here, and it didn't really need it. It was fine, but I just wanted to get rid of some of the slack that this front wheel had. This tensioner pin that goes through here can move back and forth. So I welded some big washers onto one side of it, or both sides of it, I guess. And it made that really nice and tight so it doesn't have a shake in there, and it got rid of a lot of vibrations when you were turning, especially on a harder surface like asphalt or pavement. So other than that, I've never had tracks come off on their own or just by accident. I've driven it on a lot of concrete, a lot of dirt, some gravel, just uneven terrain. I've never had it, but I guess maybe I'm just more cautious and I don't run it as hard as some people do. These do seem to be nicer tracks than a lot of them tend to come with. They're pretty thick. They're very heavy. Thick ribbing in them, not really having a ton of it tearing up. I mean, some of the teeth are, but most of them still have all their rubber on them, and the machine's doing great with it. I haven't had any problems with that, and I'm very happy. I see some of the new ones online where it's basically the same machine, but they changed it. You can tell the tracks have gotten cheaper, they're thinner, they're narrower. These are about 8 inches wide, so they help quite a bit. I've been very happy with how those are. Other than that, you guys probably saw before that this cooling fan, I originally had one under the hood right on top of the muffler. It actually is still there, but I don't use it a whole lot anymore because it's more just to cool the muffler off. I did a little research, and people were adding them to the back of the machine here. Some of the new models, this is a grate. It's not a solid piece of metal like mine was. This just blocks a ton of heat in here. This is a bad design. So I added this cooling fan, and it turns on anytime the ignition is on. And originally I was like, that's great. But in the winter, if I'm plowing snow and it's cold, it may be too much, or it's cooling. I don't want to cool the engine too much and it's not operating at its preferred temperature. So I did put a switch on here, but I didn't just do a switch. I did a reversing switch, so I could make the fan blow towards the driver, which is kind of nice in the winter because It helps cool the engine a little bit by pulling air through, but it's also blowing hot air on the driver, which is great for in the winter. But in the summer, you don't want that. You want to blow as much of the hot air through the machine as possible, over the engine, over the muffler, and out the cooler, on top of the other fans that are in here. Now, these fans will turn on their own, but I found that a lot of people are having trouble with these engines from the heads overheating. So by adding that other fan that blows air directly onto the engine along with its mechanical fan, that engine doesn't get very hot. It runs great now. I didn't have any problems with that, but I just want to avoid it. Those engines are about $1,000, and I don't feel like changing it out. It's been great so far, and haven't had a problem with it overheating. So, again, these fans are mechanical or are automatic. They will kick on their own if needed, but I usually turn them on if I'm going to be working it hard, running attachments or augers or, anything that's going to be, or if I'm just driving it for an extended period of time, I will kick those on automatic or by myself with the switch on their own. And I will eventually revert this to blowing through the machine. So those fans are sucking air through, this fan is pushing air through, and the engine fan is pushing air through. And with that fan in the rear, that's a 12-inch off Amazon, it's about $30. You will feel air blowing out here substantially more, and you'll also feel it blowing out the sides. So it's getting rid of a lot of heat in the machine and really helping with those engine temps. Now, I've never had the oil temperature overheat. I usually see it, and this is in Celsius, or like they call communist, but I've never seen it over about 58 Celsius. So it's not too hot. I haven't got it too hot. I was even running, I had a 6-foot trencher on here doing our front yard a while back this year. And I was curious to see if the machine would even run it because it's a 2-pump setup. And this is a 6-foot, I think it was a blue diamond or black diamond trencher. I just rented from the local rental company. It was a dingo style one. They looked at me a little funny when I showed up with this and hooked up to it, but they were really surprised that everything hooked up and it fired right up and ran great. Some people have the concern that because the auxiliary hydraulics are hooked to the right track that you will lose right track. Now, sometimes it would. Most of the time I could track just fine while running the attachment, running the 6-foot auger or trencher on the front there. But if you were really, trying to back uphill and had a bunch of power, you're trying to demand a lot from the pump, it would bog down a little bit. In that case, I would just back this off into the neutral and then move where I need to go and then turn the trencher back on and then walk it down into the ground and then just keep moving. But 90% of the time it worked fine. Now, if I was doing it every day, I wouldn't do it that way. I would get a 3-pump machine. But for the on occasion here and there, it works just fine. The machine did it, saved me a couple $100 of rental, and I was able to utilize the machine I already have. So that was great. And I didn't even have this fan at the time. I just had the 2 others, and I just took this back panel off at that time because it was midsummer, it was about 80 degrees outside, and I just didn't want to overheat. And even then, it got a little warm, but I never overheated it. The oil never got over, I think, 58 or 60, maybe 62. So nothing to be super concerned about. But overall, been pretty happy with it. It's been reliable. It always starts up. I did have a problem a little while back, or last week, where it was cold out. It was about 20 degrees out. Went to plow some snow with it, and it wouldn't start. And it would crank and it would sputter, and I was like, this is weird. It doesn't do this. It normally never does that. And what I found was I had these spark plugs in here. They're aftermarket performance spark plugs, and they were doing great until I found this end here slid all the way down to the tip past the electrode. Well, they're not supposed to do that. Where if you notice, that one's like that, this one's like that. That end is actually loose in there, and when the engine would get cold, they would slide down to the tip and prevent it from sparking. So I thought the engine was having an issue. I changed out the spark plugs with 2 other ones I had, and it would start up, but it was only running on 1 cylinder, and I was like, okay, something's wrong. And when it first started up, there was a boom. It sounded like a shotgun went off, and it just had a black cloud of smoke coming out the exhaust, and it actually blew the tube off the muffler that goes from the engine, the muffler, and goes down to the exhaust port down here. And it was just running terribly. And so I brought it into the shop, was looking at it, and ended up putting 2 brand new spark plugs in, and everything was fine. It started blowing a little bit of smoke, but it cleared up after about 5 minutes of running. And I've ran it for probably about an hour and a half now since then, and it's been doing great. There was nothing wrong with the engine. It was purely the spark plugs and the spark system. So a couple spark plugs, cleaned it out. I'm going to check the oil and make sure it didn't flood the cylinder with fuel and dilute the oil, but it's about due for an oil change anyway. I do them about every 10 hours. I know it's way more than you need to, but oil's cheap. Preventative maintenance, I don't really care. It's, $10-15 just to prolong a $1,000 engine. I don't really care about the price. I'd rather keep my machinery in good shape and clean and the way it needs to run. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. But otherwise, I haven't had any problems with the engine either. I did the fuel system. I think I showed that in my last video, and that's been doing great. That low pressure fuel pump, getting rid of the mechanical pump in there, that was problematic, and I haven't had any problems of it acting weird or funny. Now I did find this goes from this hose I put on here, and there is one from factory, but it's a lot shorter. This goes from the overflow on the carburetor's fuel bowl. I put it here as an indicator because sometimes if you get these machines tilted at too much of an angle on their back or front, the float switch in the carburetor bowl will open and it's already full, and so it'll just start dumping fuel out of here. So that's kind of my indication of like, oh, this is too much of an angle. So not a big deal, unless you're really working it on some slopes or tipping it or whatever is going to happen. You're not going to run into that problem.